all the way my Savior leads me. Cheers each winding path I tread, gives me grace for every trial, feeds me with the living bread.
Good morning, everybody. Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. Clint Day is your host. Thank you so much for being with us. We get started today with 1 Samuel chapter 31 and a portion of 1 Samuel that, to a large degree, we've been waiting on for the entirety of the book. Really, from the beginning of chapter 16 onward, the end of chapter 15, we've been anticipating at some point Saul's going to die and David's going to get ready to take over the kingdom. This is not, when I say anticipating or waiting for, it doesn't mean we've been excited about it. It's just you keep wondering, at least I do when I read the story, when is Saul going to die? When's it going to come to a conclusion? At some point it's going to come to a conclusion. And for the last 15 chapters or so, we've been watching this story unfold. Saul chases David. David is being prepared to be the king. But God in his time is working out all things in accordance with his own purposes for the good of his people and for his own glory. And so you know what we do. We read the Bible, we discuss it. That's what we're going to do here in 1 Samuel chapter 31. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain at Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines struck down Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchi-Shua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard against Saul, and the archers found him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword, and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and mistreat me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell upon his sword and died with him. Thus Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all his men, all on the same day together. And when the men of Israel, who were on the other side of the valley, and those beyond the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled, and the Philistines came and lived in them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols and to their people. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went at night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And he took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So this story is the story of Saul's ultimate death. Saul and his men are at battle against the Philistines. At some point this is going to happen. And so as they go to battle against the Philistines, Saul is ultimately defeated, as is all the rest of Israel's army. They are defeated, and Saul finds himself in a predicament where he asks his armor-bearer to kill him, because Saul recognizes that he is not going to be treated well by the Philistines. He's not going to be treated well by what he calls the uncircumcised, the barbaric peoples. And so Saul says to his armor-bearer, "Will you kill me?" And his armor-bearer says, "No, I'm not going to do it." But Saul says, "Well, if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it myself." And so Saul takes his own life. And at that moment, Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer all are dead. The Philistines find them as they're going through the bodies the next day. And then they take Saul and they put him in one of their temples, his head, and they put him on display as if their God was victorious over Saul and his people's God. And that we've talked about that before, but I think it's important to remember in the Old Testament when nations went to battle, it wasn't just nation against nation. In the modern world, we go to battle. It's nation against nation. Who's got the stronger weapons? Who's got the fiercest fighting force, etc. But in the Old Testament, it was a religious thing as well. And so when you went to battle, when one nation goes to battle against another nation, they go to in the name of their God. And so on the battlefield, right, the idea is not only is the Philistines in this moment, stronger than the Israelites, their God is stronger than the God of the Bible. Their God is stronger than the God of Israel in their minds. And so when they kill Saul, and they find Saul dead, I should say, and they defeat the Israelites, they take the head of the king and take him and put him in the temple of their God, the god Ashtoreth. And so it's a demonstration in their mind that their God is supreme, and they're offering their enemy to their God in valiant worship of him or of her, whichever one it may be in that moment. And so it's interesting, when they go to battle, it's religious. We don't think about it that way, but we ought to. That's how the Bible frames the world. The Bible frames the world as a battle between good and evil, between Satan and God, between right and wrong. It's ultimately God's world. God created it, but the world rebelled against him. You and I rebel in our sin. And so when we go against God, right, the world is against God by nature and under the control of the devil. And so in our natural states, we are opposed to God. Saul recognized that the uncircumcised are going to do something to him. It's a religious concept. Saul understands that. They take the body and they put the body in the temple as a demonstration of their God's power. And so we have to understand the world's not neutral. It's not neutral. It is not neutral. It is against God. And so the people of God go forward in the name of God. And we have to understand the world that way. We want to live in a secular society that pushes religion to the side. It says religion doesn't really matter. But religion does matter, because all that we do comes out of our religious beliefs. We can talk about ideologies being religious beliefs. People are religious toward different ideologies in our world, progressive ideologies or woke ideologies, or however you want to say it. We even have people who are religious in their beliefs toward conservative ideologies, etc. Right? And so we have to understand that religion plays a huge part, and even in those days and even now. And so what we realize is that God is the God of the Bible. He has a purpose. The only reason the Philistines were able to be victorious is because God enabled them to do that. God allowed them to do that because God was bringing judgment on Saul. And it was God's way, ultimately, of putting his people in a position where David would come and save them and giving them what they deserve because of their rejection of him. And so it's important to recognize that God has a purpose. He has a plan. There's one grand scheme unfolding here. God's purposes, God's glory. God is using his people to push back evil and to advance his kingdom on this earth. He's doing the same with us as he did then, and we recognize it in the same way. You guys have a great day. God bless you. 1 Samuel's a great book. We'll pick it up with David finding out the news that Jonathan and Saul had been killed tomorrow as we look at 2 Samuel chapter 1. Take care. God bless you. See you soon.
You carry me close to your heart, and surely your goodness and mercy will find